What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Fist First. We got a main, we got a main card. We got a pay-per-view event to break down. We're actually going to get into the preliminaries a little bit today, since we have a pay-per-view. Guys, I got predictions. We're going to take a look at updated rankings. Guys, you're going to want to stay tuned for this one.
That is a which is fun, but you got to be ready for that. But it's
And welcome back to another episode of Fist First, guys. As always, I'm your host, Steve, and we are streaming here on DSM Media's YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Guys, please do not forget to hit that like, follow, subscribe button, whatever platform you guys are on. That will help us out tremendously. Now we have UFC 282 right around the corner here in a couple days. Guys, we're going to get into the preliminary card. We're going to get into the main card. We're going to break it down all for you guys today. But first, as always, we're going to start off with a little bit of UFC news. And first and foremost, I would say the biggest news since Monday, a piece of news that I think people came to expect, and that is TJ Dillashaw. After his fight with Aljamain Sterling, after that injury to the shoulder, he officially retires. He's done with the UFC. I think this is a piece of news that I personally have seen coming. To be honest, it's starting to look more and more like his fight with Aljamain Sterling was kind of just for the money. Apparently, he injured that shoulder months before that fight. So TJ Dillashaw is done with the UFC. That fight with Aljamain Sterling was probably just for money. So see you, TJ. Great career. Great drug issues. Thank you, TJ. Now moving on here. Another piece of saddening news, if you will. Dustin Poirier is finally, actually now this is a piece of good news, because today, this morning, I believe, this Wednesday morning, Dustin Poirier was released from the hospital. Now, for those of you who don't know, what happened is Dustin Poirier had a staph infection in his foot. His body was not responding to antibiotics. Since that happened, that became life-threatening for Poirier, but all is good. He was released from the hospital today. Guys, check his foot out, man. That's pretty disgusting. I think he tweeted that out a couple days ago. That's pretty gross. Thoughts and prayers go to Poirier. He's still recovering, although he is out from the hospital. Who knows when we will see him back in action, but hopefully soon, because I am a Poirier fan. So we'll see when it comes back to action. It's going to take, I'm sure, a little bit of time to recover from that, if it's as bad as it looks. Last piece of news here. Joe Rogan calls out Conor McGregor, saying McGregor's piss would probably melt a drug test cup. And to be honest, Joe, I kind of agree with you, man. I don't think there's one person on this planet that can convince me that Conor McGregor is not on steroids. I'm sorry. I just, nobody can convince me of that. I actually have a little progression picture that I found here. And just take a look at this, man. Right? So we're talking when he started in the UFC, 145, and now around 155. That was his fights with Poirier. Now he's moving to welterweight at 170. Guys, you can't look at these pictures and tell me this man isn't on steroids, right? This man makes a ridiculous amount of money. This Conor McGregor was the highest paid athlete by minute of action in 2022, and I don't even believe he fought. I think his last fight with Poirier, if I'm not mistaken, was in 21. So, I mean, you can't tell me this man isn't on steroids looking at this. I do believe he is yet to be tested by the USADA. Um, but we will keep you informed with that. Obviously, he is looking to come back into the UFC, but first he has to pass that test. So, hey, man, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's not on steroids, but you look at the man, and I can't see it. I can't see him passing a test. Unless he swaps his pee out with somebody, it ain't happening, brother. Looks like he's on a ridiculous amount of steroids there. Now, before we get into this pay-per-view event, there is something new I want to do with you guys today, and I kind of wanted to start doing this every Wednesday. Is just look at the UFC updated rankings. They're typically released on Tuesday mornings. Sometimes they don't come out until Wednesday, but I'm pretty sure I'll be able to share this with you guys on Wednesdays from now on. So let's take a look here. Updated rankings. UFC came out yesterday. Starting with the flyweight division here. Obviously, Nicolau is going to move up a spot. He beat Matt Schnell. He fought down. He's still going to crack himself into that top 5 in that flyweight division. So congrats to Matthias Nicolau. Taking a look here at the bantamweight division. Everybody's moving up a spot. Saeed Nurmagomedov gets ranked. He's now in the top 15. That bantamweight division continues to get stacked. And not only that, we got a couple UFC debuters coming into that bantamweight division looking to make some noise. So that bantamweight division is continuing to look like an absolutely stacked and threatening division. Now moving on to featherweight, Jonathan Pierce gets ranked after his fight. He's now in the top 15. Other than that, not much movement there in the featherweight division. Looking at lightweight, no action there. Welterweight, Jeff Neal moves down 1. Stephen Thompson, after a great performance, does not move. He stays stagnant there at 6. In your middleweight division. Now, all right, so middleweight here. This is where it gets interesting for me when I was looking at these rankings. So obviously you had that Hermanson Dolids fight. Dolids gets put at number 8 in that middleweight division. I get Hermanson was 8 and you beat the 8 guy, so I guess you would take 8. I still think it's kind of a big jump for him, in my opinion, right? From going unranked to 8. I guess it's because it was a short notice fight that he won against a top 10 guy. But I feel like it can be a little insulting to guys down here. You look at Chris Curtis, who's fighting this weekend. You look at Dricus du Plessis, who's fighting this weekend. Darren Till, who shouldn't really be ranked in the top 10, in my opinion. But you look at some of these guys below him, and I just think it's too big of a jump, in my opinion. I was kind of expecting him to get maybe that 12, 13, 14 spot. But albeit, Dolids does get put into that top 10, and he gets put in there significantly in the top 8. So we'll see what's next for Dolids. I think it's too big of a jump, but hey, man, we will see. Obviously, here, light heavyweight, there's no champion. Yuri Prochazka vacated his belt. Actually, you got Blachowicz and Ankylov taking on each other for the vacant belt. So, number 3 ranked, number 4 ranked is going to get a chance to jump to number 1, actually the champion overall. Obviously, the only movement in that division is everybody moving down 1 since that belt is vacated. Now, finally, another interesting one. Heavyweight division. Sergey Pavlovich took on Tai Tuivasa. Sergey Pavlovich destroyed Tai Tuivasa in less than a minute in his last fight. I expected them to swap spots. Tuivasa moving down to 4, Pavlovich moving up to, Tai Tuivasa moving down to 5, Pavlovich moving up to 4. but Pavlovich actually jumps Curtis Blades as well, striking him in that number 3 overall in the heavyweight division. I think that all but confirms my speculation that Cyril Gane may be next for him. You could argue Stipe. We don't know if John Jones is going to get Stipe or Francis Ngannou. Either way, I think Sergey Pavlovich destroys Miocic. So I think my speculation with Gane is starting to come to fruition here. Pavlovich versus Gane is probably next for that heavyweight division. Now, looking here at the women's divisions, not a whole lot of movement. Emily Ducat moving down 1. Other than that, not much movement in any women's division. I guess that's to be expected. Not a whole lot of recent top ranked women's fights. So that is going to do it for our updated UFC rankings. I think the most notable one would be Roman Dolidze moving into that number 8 spot. I'm sorry, number 8 spot in that middleweight division. Other than that, Sergey Pavlovich maybe moving up to 3 could be more notable. When you talk about title contentions, but some decent movement in some of those weight classes. So we will see what's next. I'm sure we're going to get a whole lot of movement after Saturday. And speaking of, it is time to get into Saturday's actions. Obviously, this is a pay-per-view event. For pay-per-view events at Fist First, we are going to break down preliminary fights as well. And I'm going to give you some bets later on in the show to hopefully make you guys some money. Now, starting with the preliminaries, and before I really get into this, this is, I don't know if you could see it down there on the scrolling banner. This is kind of a debut takeover. We got a lot of debuts coming into this pay-per-view card. A total of 6 UFC debuters are set to make their claim or set to stake their claim on the UFC. And that starts with the very first fight where we have a battle of 2 UFC debuters. We got Cameron Simon taking on Steven Koslow. Now, before I break this fight down, Steven Koslow probably has one of the most unique nicknames in the UFC. I wanted to share that with you for those of you guys who don't know. Steven Koslow's nickname is Obi-Wan Shinobi the Pillow. Very interesting nickname. It kind of makes me want to watch him fight. It kind of makes me want to cheer for him in this fight, just that nickname alone. But Steven Koslow is a replacement in this fight, taking this fight on short notice. Obviously, that is tough to do. We saw Roman Dolidze kind of dominate a short notice fight last week, but that's very rare cases. I think short notice fights are very tough, especially having it being your UFC debut. Although he is taking this fight on short notice against another UFC debuter, so I guess that you could cut some slack there for Steven Koslow and take a little bit of pressure off. So sticking on the topic of Steven Koslow, this is a guy who went 6-0 in the Florida-based fight promotion Combat Night. Dude's nasty. 6-0. 6 professional. This is all professional. 6 finishes, all first round submissions there on Combat Night. All first round submissions, 6-0. Incredible feat for Koslow. He's going to have a challenge though. Standing across from him, another UFC debuter, Cameron Simon, who won a contract on Dana White Contender Series back in August. Cameron Simon, who's also 21 years old, but extremely dangerous with his hands. Dana White saw that back in August. We all saw that back in August. This man is dangerous with his hands. Kid throws bombs. Cameron Simon's also 6-0 professionally. 4 of his 6 wins coming by knockout, 1 by submission. These fighters combined have a 92% finish rate. This is going to make for an absolute banger of an opening fight to an entire pay-per-view. This is going to be a banger of a fight. Obviously, both guys being debuters, the UFC is a different animal, as we see time and time again with these debuters, but they're fighting each other on their debut. So we'll see. I think this fight's really going to come down to Koslow's wrestling versus Simon's hands. Obviously, like I said, Steven Koslow is 6-0 with 6 first-round submissions. Cameron Simon is 6-0 with 4 of those being knockouts. This is strictly going to come down to talent. There's not really an experience upper hand here. So both of these guys are going to look to showcase their talents. It's going to be a banger of a fight. I think another thing to look out for here is Steven Koslow and his gas tank. 6-0 with 6 first-round submissions is impressive, albeit, but the kid has yet to see a second round professionally. We don't really know his gas tank. It wasn't tested. We have seen Simon's gas tank, which is pretty legit. With that being said, I would look for Koslow to wrestle early. If he does that, I think he's going to get tired. If Simon can outlast the wrestling attempts, the longer this fight goes, I think the more it favors Cameron Simon. And I think we could potentially see a Simon knocking out Steven Koslow to secure his first win in the UFC. 21-year-old Cameron Simon, I'm probably locking that in as a win for him. Up and comer. Again, in that bantamweight division, this is a bantamweight fight. So Cameron Simon, a 21-year-old young stud getting his UFC debut win by knockout, is going to put some more threatening fighters into that bantamweight division. An extremely fun fight to start off UFC 282. Now moving on here, we got a fight in the flyweight division, yet another UFC debuter. Vinicius Salvador taking on Daniel Da Silva. Salvador being the UFC debuter. Salvador won a contract on Dana White Contender Series back in August as well. And Salvador was a guy who was also a star at another promotion, much like Koslow was. Vinicius Salvador fought on Pentagon Combat. He was 5-0 with a 100% finish rate there. He finds his way to the UFC with a win on Dana White Contender Series. And Vinicius Salvador is a man with major knockout potential. This guy is a brawler, very light defense though. Vinicius Salvador likes to brawl. He's kind of like a Brian Barberena, right? A guy that I relate to, a street fighter. Dude likes to throw bombs. Dude likes to get in scraps. But dude's going to get hit. Vinicius Salvador is going to get hit. So we'll see. You know, in the heavyweight division, you can kind of see guys get away with power, low defense. You go to the flyweight division where this fight's at, you tend to see the bombs and the light defense not really work because guys are kind of quicker. So that's going to bring me to this point with Daniel Da Silva being the guy facing Vinicius Salvador. Daniel Da Silva is kind of a guy with his back against the wall, right? He started 0-3 in the UFC. Daniel Da Silva has talent but little IQ. So, Salvador's fight method, fight style of being a brawler could work against a guy like Da Silva who doesn't really have the IQ, really needed to succeed in the UFC. All that being said, Daniel Da Silva has something to prove, right? I said his back's against the wall. He's 0-3 in the UFC. All 3 of his fights have ended in him being finished. So Daniel Da Silva, the guy with little IQ, needs to be smart in this fight. Because like I said, Salvador's fight style could actually work against a guy like Da Silva. With that being said, I think I'm going to lock in Salvador knocking out Da Silva. I just think Salvador's fight style complements Daniel Da Silva's fight style. It's going to give him more of the upper edge. He's going to be able to land bombs. Da Silva might get rattled. So I kind of like Da Silva going 0-4, probably done in the UFC. And Vinicius Salvador taking his UFC debut with a win, starting 1-0 in the UFC. But guys, this is another fight that's going to be pretty exciting, in my opinion, to start UFC 282. So we have back to back potential brawls, potential bangers, and we will see which UFC debuters is going to stake his claim in the UFC and start off 1-0. Which also leads me into this third fight here, TJ Brown taking on Eric Silva in the featherweight division. And we have yet another UFC debuter in this fight, Eric Silva. Eric Silva, a guy who's 4-0 in the Lux Fight League. Again, a guy 4-0 with 4 first-round submissions, similar to Steven Koslow. Although Steven Koslow didn't go through Dana White Contender Series, Eric Silva did. Eric Silva is a guy who won his contract on Dana White Contender Series also back in August via a first-round knockout. So Eric Silva, let's break this guy down real quick. Right, he's 4-0 in the Lux League. He has 4 first-round submissions in that 4-0 run. Gets a first-round knockout on Dana White Contender Series. So this is a guy who's going to look to bring the pressure. This is a guy who's going to look to bring the excitement to the UFC. I would look for Silva to probably attack TJ Brown very early. Probably look for takedowns a little early to lower TJ Brown's eyes. This way he can land bigger blows. I do really think this has potential to be another quick finish by Eric Silva. And if he does have that quick finish, he's going to be an interesting threat to this featherweight division. This guy with incredible finishing ability in Eric Silva. So we'll see if Eric Silva can get another string here. He's going to have he's not going to have an easy time here against TJ Brown. And TJ Brown is a guy who is also another Dana White Contender Series alum. He earned his contract back in 2019. Did not find a whole lot of success in the UFC. TJ Brown is 2-3 with no finishes in the UFC. And here's what's interesting about TJ Brown. He's a guy with, you watch him fight, and he's a guy with a decent amount of skill. I can't say TJ Brown's a bad fighter. His skill is there. The problem with TJ Brown is he historically has a very weak chin. Having a weak chin in the UFC is not going to bring you much treasures, much gold, much luck. It's not. And especially the way Silva throws. Silva's an aggressive fighter. Whether it's takedowns, whether it's striking, he's going to be aggressive in this fight. And TJ Brown having a weak chin is not going to complement him. Like I said, I think Eric Silva has a potential for another early finish, and I'm probably going to lock that one in. Eric Silva is going to beat TJ Brown. I'm going to say he knocks him out in the second round. That's my prediction there. I think Eric Silva throws takedowns a lot in the first. He lowers TJ Brown's eye level. He's going to start throwing his hands in the second. He's going to land a big one. TJ Brown's going to go out. Eric Silva's going to start in the UFC 1-0. TJ Brown's going to move to 2-4. So that is the third fight here to start UFC 282. Yet another interesting fight. Now, these first 3 fights, casual UFC fans don't really know these names. But guys, I would watch these fights. These are going to be good fights. This maybe I'm crazy for saying this. These preliminary fights, I think, are going to be better than the main event. The main card. I'm sorry, the main card. This is a main card I'm not necessarily excited for. I was on the ropes about even buying the pay-per-view, to be honest. Do I want to spend $80 to watch these fights? I genuinely don't know. As a UFC fan, I feel like I have to. As a casual UFC fan, it's going to sound weird being a UFC show, me telling you to skip out on a pay-per-view. If you're splitting it with friends, watch it. If not, maybe skip it. Anyway, I'm getting way off topic here. Moving on to the fourth fight here. You got Billy Quarantillo versus Alex the Great Hernandez. Billy Quarantillo, first fight in over a year. Ring rust. Ring rust is definitely going to play a role here. right? Because Quarantillo is a guy who typically likes to push the pace of the fight. Now, being this first fight in a year, is he going to be able to keep up with his old ways? Is he going to be able to keep up with his way he used to pace and his aggressive ways? We will see. I think the year off could have an effect on Quarantillo here. But he's fighting a guy in Alex Hernandez who's fighting at featherweight for the first time since 2013. As we've seen before, it's tough for people to switch weight classes so easily. So Billy Quarantillo's time off is going to be battling against Alex Hernandez' weight change. Is Alex Hernandez's body going to be able to keep up with the potential pace of Quarantillo? I don't know. I think Alex Hernandez could make this a wrestling match. I think Alex Hernandez he historically has a weak gas tank. So I think you're going to see Alex Hernandez try to make this a wrestling match. This is a fight that has a potential to be a banger. At the same time, I think Alex Hernandez is going to try to steal this win by decision. I think he's going to try to out wrestle Quarantillo. So this is the first fight in this preliminary card that I think could be a snoozer. You look at the names and you're like, this should be a decent fight. But with Hernandez switching weight classes, I think he's going to. Well, not only that, Alex Hernandez is switching weight classes. You're also seeing Quarantillo fight in the first time in over a year. We'll see. I think this is going to be a slow paced fight. I really do. I could be wrong. I think this is your first slow paced fight of the night. I really don't know who's going to win. This is one that I'm not going to put a bet on. But we will see. We will see. It makes for an interesting fight because of the names. I think it makes for a snoozer because of the situation. That moving on from that, we're coming up to a potential banger, a potential fight of the night. We're looking at the action man, Chris Curtis, taking on one of the guys with the most deadliest knockouts we have ever seen in Joaquin Buckley. This is a potential banger of a middleweight clash. And I want to touch on Chris Curtis's last fight first. Chris Curtis's last fight came against Jack Hermanson, who we just saw lose to Roman Dolidze. But Jack Hermanson made Chris Curtis look like a fool. I'm not going to lie. Jack Hermanson basically was the professor, and Chris Curtis was the student in that fight. And the professor whooped the student's butt. Jack Hermanson basically danced around Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis couldn't get the hands going. Chris Curtis forgot you can kick in the UFC. And what did this do? This prompted sore loser Chris Curtis to come out. I don't even think he shook Jack Hermanson's hand. There was no sportsmanship. Chris Curtis was an extremely sore loser in that fight. And really in a fight where he just got outclassed, right? You saw Chris Curtis's lack of IQ in that fight. But here's the thing. Joaquin Buckley is quick. Joaquin Buckley is mobile. Joaquin Buckley could do the same thing Jack Hermanson did and steal this one by decision against Chris Curtis. But I don't think Joaquin Buckley's going to do that. Joaquin Buckley is a guy who likes to go headfirst into a brawl. Both these guys lost their last time out. Both these guys are looking to make a statement. So this has the potential to be an absolute brawl. This could be a street fight. This could be a bar fight. And it's going to come down to a guy in Chris Curtis. Can he wear out Joaquin Buckley? We see Chris Curtis. He likes to invest in the body. He likes to wear people out. Is he going to be able to do that against Joaquin Buckley? Because if he can't, we could see Buckley land one late that could put Chris Curtis to sleep. Either way, this fight's going to be a banger. This fight is one that I have circled. I think this is one a lot of UFC fans have circled for this preliminary card. Guys, it's free. It's a free fight. This is a fight you cannot miss. And this is the fight that even casual fans might know these names. Chris Curtis, Joaquin Buckley. Do not miss that fight. That's going to bring us up to the next fight. A man that we used to hear a lot of his name, Edmund Shabazian, taking on Dutch Lungiambula. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name. This is another middleweight clash. Now let's look at Edmund Shabazian. This is a guy a couple years ago. We heard this guy's name circling around title contention. That faded quickly. Edmund's now winless since 2019. This is Shabazian's first fight in 13 months. And he's fighting a guy in Lungiambula who is not a very technical fighter, but he's a wild fighter. He looks for kill shots. Lungiambula, though, is also riding a 3-fight losing streak. So I think that's going to make him more wild, right? Lungiambula wants this finish. Lungiambula wants to knock out Shabazian quick, in my opinion. Lungiambula is looking to make a statement against an ex-title contention threat. But Lungiambula is not very technical. I think he's a little too wild, and I think that's going to play a huge role for a Shabazian victory here. Shabazian's way more versatile, way more technical, way more fight intelligent, and I think Shabazian's going to get a win here. I think he's going to be able to piece Lungiambula apart. Whether he's going to land a powerful blow against Lungiambula, I don't know. I think I kind of like Shabazian more as a decision because I think he's a guy that's going to use his versatility to his advantage. He's going to be quick. He's going to be in and out. He's going to pick him apart. So I kind of like Edmund Shabazian by decision here. There's always that threat of a one-punch knockout for Lungiambula. I don't think it's going to happen. But we'll see. Both these guys are hungry, guys. This is another fight to watch, right? You get to watch an ex-title contender for free, or an ex-potential title contender for free, because this is in the prelim. So another fight you don't want to miss after that Chris Curtis Joaquin Buckley fight. And that brings us here to the moment a lot of UFC fans have been waiting for. Raul Rosas Jr.'s UFC debut. And Rosas Jr. is going to be taking on Jay Perrin. The 18-year-old Raul Rosas Jr., the Phenom, is making his UFC debut. At 18, I was submitting my college applications. At 18, I was figuring out what to do with my life. At 18, this kid's fighting in the UFC. Raul Rosas Jr., 6-0 as a professional with 5 finishes. This kid is an absolute problem on the mat. With that being said, Jay Perrin is not an easy foe. Like I said, the UFC is a different animal. It's a different monster. Jay Perrin is a very well-rounded fighter who's going to give Raul Rosas problems if this is a stand-up fight. I think Rosas Jr. has the advantage on the mat slightly, though. I think Perrin's experience will allow him to exploit any mistakes Raul Rosas Jr. makes. So I think this fight is going to come down to experience. Being young, being in your debut, Rosas Jr. could be a little jumpy in this fight. He might be able to take over on the mat, but might pass up on potentially tight submission opportunities because of his jumpiness. With experience being a role here, this isn't a gimme fight for Jay Perrin. But if he can weather some of the storms that Raul Rosas is going to throw at him in that veteran kind of mindset, Jay Perrin can definitely snag this win. And I'm going to pull up DraftKings later, but I just wanted to mention this real quick because this is pretty interesting. Raul Rosas Jr. is a minus 230 favorite. I think that's pretty significant in my opinion. But like I said, Raul Rosas Jr. is a problem. So we will see. This is a very interesting fight. Um, Again, this is a fight you don't want to miss. An 18-year-old kid making his UFC debut, looking to go 1-0 at 18, just incredible. So we will see what happens on Saturday with the young phenom. And that is going to land us at our final fight in this preliminary. Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Chris Daukaus, the clash of heavyweights. You look at these names, you look at the weight class being heavyweight, you're thinking slugfest. Tuivasa versus Pavlovich, Tuivasa versus Gane, Rozenstruik versus Alistair Overeem a couple years ago. This could be a potential slugfest. But I'm going to flip the coin on you real quick. I think this also has a high potential to be a bust. Right? These are two heavy-hitting heavyweights. So that potential for a slugfest is obviously there. On the other hand, though, I'm flipping the coin to the other side. Both of these guys could play this fight cautiously. Both of these guys have hopes at a potential title shot. They're both struggling right now. They both need a win to keep their title hopes alive. So you could see a very cautious fight out of both of these guys. This does also have potential to be a one-punch finish. If that's the case, I think I favor Rozenstruik, a guy who literally punched the lip off of Alistair Overeem. So this is tough. I don't really know what to make of this fight. Whether it's boring, whether it's a booming banger, I think either way it's going to favor Rozenstruik. I'm a big Chris Daukaus fan, right? He's a Philly cop. He has an incredible story. He's the man. I just think he's taking a little bit more than he can chew. He's biting a little more than he could chew here. So I kind of like Rozenstruik here. I'm probably staying away from this bet. But we will see. That could be a potential banger of a last fight of the preliminary card. It is a fight I really wouldn't miss just because of that potential. But we will see which side of the coin that fight is when we come down to the action on Saturday. So that is the end of the preliminary card there. And we are moving on to the main card breakdown. Did the preliminary can outshine this main card? I'm not saying this main card isn't going to be good, though. We're going to start here with the Bryce Mitchell-Ilia Topuria fight, the first fight of the main card. You look at these names, this fight could be a banger. It's not really my kind of fight, though. I'm not a huge Bryce Mitchell fan. Bryce Mitchell's a guy who wrestles with high pressure and intensity. He's a huge submission threat. He spends the majority of his fights on the ground. It's a guy who a lot of his fights go to decision just because he just dominates people on the ground. It's really not the kind of fights that I like to watch. I have respect for it. I have respect for Bryce Mitchell, but he's not really a fighter that strikes my eye. And he's taken on a guy in Ilia Topuria who is probably one of the better athletes that Bryce Mitchell has faced. Ilia Topuria is going to have the clear striking advantage. Will that be enough to match Mitchell's wrestling? I don't think so. Ilia Topuria's takedown defense is going to be absolutely key here. You need to do this with pressure. You need to put pressure on Bryce Mitchell early. You put the pressure on Mitchell early, you could get some sloppy takedown attempts, which you can look to counter as Topuria. Now, with this snoozer wrestling match potential, this fight does have pretty huge implications for the featherweight title contention. If Bryce Mitchell wins, he's probably going to get a top 5 guy. If Ilia Topuria wins, he's going to get a top 10, another top 10 guy. So whether this fight's good personally or not, it does have huge title implications. So I can't discredit it. I just don't think the fight's necessarily going to be entertaining for my type of fight style. Now that moves us to a fight that is going to be interesting for my type of fight style. And one of two fights that could steal this main card. And this one's Darren Till taking on Dricus Du Plessis. Now let's start with Till here. Because this is an absolute make or break fight for Darren Till. It's a guy who's talented, but really just hasn't won a lot. Darren Till, the gorilla, is a man. Darren Till is a sniper, right? Darren Till is a guy who likes to coordinate his shots. He likes to strike effectively. It's going to be tough in this fight. Dricus Du Plessis is a very wild fighter. So I think you're going to see Darren Till's defense play a role here. And not more, I would say more the counter game is going to play a huge role for Darren Till here. Darren Till is going to be eager to fight though. And that could play a role because I think the biggest key is patience and counter in this fight for Darren Till. I think Darren Till might try to do too much to make a statement on his return. And if he tries to do that, he's going to get put to sleep. I really do believe that. But we talk about ring rust, and Darren Till, I'm telling you, he's going to have it. So we'll see what kind of style Darren Till comes out with. I don't think he's going to win if he comes out strong. Because I think patience and counter is your biggest key to victory here. Because, moving on to Dricus Du Plessis, this dude is extremely dangerous. It's a name not a lot of casual fans know. But Du Plessis is a guy with an amazing chin, amazing power. He's got an amazing gas tank. And he's a guy who's going to completely overwhelm Darren Till. Now, what did I say? Darren Till, his key is patience and the counter. That makes Du Plessis' keys to victory here. Guy in Darren Till who hasn't fought in a while. Du Plessis has to do anything he can do to confuse Darren Till. And when he does that, Darren Till is going to be wide open for power shots, especially with that ring rust. So we'll see. I really do believe Du Plessis is going to completely overwhelm Darren Till. Du Plessis is a tough opponent after a long time off. And I know Darren Till hasn't really won a lot of fights in a while. But if Dricus Du Plessis wins here, he definitely proves to be a middleweight threat. Like I said here, going back to the rankings, Darren Till is still ranked at 10. He's still ranked at that's pretty interesting. And if we see the same thing that happened to Roman Dolidze, moving to 8 after that win versus Hermanson, if Du Plessis wins here, he's going to be in the top 10, right? You have to put him in the top 10. At least 10 if Du Plessis wins this fight. And if he does, I think that he's going to prove to be a huge threat at middleweight. I think Du Plessis' fight style really complements the middleweight division. And with a win here, it's going to prove it even more. So I do kind of like a Du Plessis here. And that's going to take us to the next fight here. Santiago Ponzinibbio. He was originally scheduled to take on Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler pulled out. In steps in Alex Morano. At first glance, I didn't think this was going to be a great fight. Just because Ponzinibbio aggressive. Morano on short notice doesn't have a lot of time to game plan for that aggressiveness. He could get knocked out early. The more I thought about it, though, the more I realized how much I was discrediting Alex Morano. Now Alex Morano is taking this fight on short notice against an extremely wild fighter in Santiago Ponzinibbio. But Morano can potentially let Ponzinibbio beat himself. If Ponzinibbio comes out strong and looks to end this fight quick, I honestly believe it favors Morano more. Morano's going to have the advantage on the ground. You could look to see Morano take Ponzinibbio down, right? If Ponzinibbio is fighting so wildly, he's going to be wide open for takedowns. So you could see Alex Morano completely dominate this fight on the ground, which could make for a potential snoozer. With that being said, Alex Morano is also a very extremely well-rounded fighter, so he can put up a fight on his feet. And it's gonna I think this fight really comes down to Ponzinibbio's aggressiveness. Is that going to benefit him, or is that going to make him have a disadvantage in this fight? If this fight stays standing, this fight's going to get extremely interesting. And I'll put a prediction on it. If this fight stays standing, this fight's going to get extremely bloody. This this fight has extreme bar fight potential. With that being said, I think I'm leaning more on Morano to try to execute takedowns and control this fight on the ground. But you never know. Morano could go out on short notice and look to take advantage of Ponzinibbio's aggressiveness and try to knock him out quick. We'll see. Makes for a very interesting fight. Very fun fight potential. I think this is really the Darren Till Duplessis fight is going to be fun. I think this one's going to be a little more fun. I think these are honestly my top two fights of the main card. But we will see. Both those fights have potential fight of the night. That's going to take us into the fight, the man. They know him. They love him. Paddy the Baddy is back. Paddy the Baddy is taking on Jared Gordon in this co-main event. I'm not a huge fan of Paddy. I said it before. The stuff he does out of the ring, I can respect. I think he's an overhyped fighter, though. Should this be a co-main event of a pay-per-view card? No. No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. And I don't really think you can disagree with me there. I don't think there's anything you could say that would flip my opinion on that matter. This shouldn't be a co-main event. With that being said, this is a huge fight for Paddy, right? Because if Paddy can win, can get a win versus Jared Gordon, you're probably looking at him getting a ranked opponent in his next fight. Most likely, you would think. My problem with Paddy Pimblett, though, is his longevity. How long is he going to be able to keep up with these massive weight cuts? He fights, he gets fat, he cuts weight. Fights, gets fat, cuts weight. That's going to take a toll on your body. And we'll see how long he can keep this up. But Paddy Pimblett, his key to victory here is going to be able to extend this fight. He's going to have to extend this fight. He's going to constantly have to look for finishes. He's fighting a guy in Jared Gordon who's not really known for his finishes. So I really do believe the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Pimblett. Now, with that being said, if this goes to decision, it's going to be interesting. I would look for Paddy Pimblett probably to really push for a finish in the second or third round. He's the better of the two in finishing people. Obviously, as we've seen, Paddy Pimblett is a threat on the ground. He's always going to threaten submissions. He's fighting a guy in Jared Gordon who predominantly likes to stay on his feet, right? Jared Gordon's a guy who likes to fight with pace. He's a guy who likes to grind out people. He's a guy who likes to push the pace and wear guys out. Is he going to be able to do that against Paddy? Maybe, right? I talked about Paddy Pimblett's his weight cut, how that's going to affect him when he's fighting a guy like Jared Gordon who likes to push the pace and likes to wear guys out. We'll see. It's going to be a tough. I think this is Paddy's toughest fight yet. You could say Jordan Levitt. I do believe this is Paddy's toughest fight yet. And like I said, if Paddy wins, it's a huge win for him. He's most likely going to fight ranked next. Am I excited for this fight? No. And here's the thing. This is one thing I want to say about Paddy Pimblett. I'm not discrediting his opponents beforehand. If Paddy Pimblett fights a guy with serious finish ability, and we're talking about like, so he's in the lightweight division. Let me take a look at the lightweight division real quick. Let me read names for you: Dan Hooker, Jalen Turner, Gamrot, RDA, Rafael Fiziev, even Renato Moicano. If he fights any of those guys ranked, Paddy Pimblett's going to lose. He's going to lose. I'm not a huge fan. He can definitely win my fandom, and it starts with a win this weekend. I do think he does get the win, but we will see. That's the co-main event. Shouldn't really be, but how can you not like? As a casual UFC fan, Paddy Pimblett's a guy you're probably going to like. It's probably a guy you're going to like to watch fight. So it should make an interesting fight for you, the casual fans here. And that's going to lead us to our main event. Don't really have much to say about it. Jan Blachowicz taking on Magomed Ankalaev. This fight was originally supposed to be Yuri Prochazka, Glover Teixeira. Neither of them are fighting. Prochazka vacated the belt. This fight is for that vacant belt. I don't really like this fight. I'm not going to lie to you. I think Jan Blachowicz is completely outmatched. To be honest, I think Ankalaev gets a pretty easy win here. With that being said, Jan Blachowicz did surprise us against Israel Adesanya. Can he do it again? I don't think so. Magomed Ankalaev's a guy who can connect with some serious power, and he could put Blachowicz in some serious danger. Only way I think Jan Blachowicz walks out with the vacated belt, he has to fight this fight like he fought Izzy, staying away from danger and pretty much out grappling him. You know, Jan can threaten with power. I think that's a little dangerous game, though, to play with Ankalaev. So, like I said, I think Ankalaev gets the win here fairly easily. I don't really think Jan's going to out grapple him. I think this fight's going to come down to standing, to power, to the striking department, and that's where Magomed's going to seal his victory. I don't really have much else to say about this fight. I'm not really happy about this main event. Um, like I said, I'm not really happy about this whole main card. But we will see. The UFC could prove me wrong. This could be an absolute banger of a card. We'll see. That's going to bring us here to the final segment here. I'm going to try to put together a winning bet slip for you guys. I'm going to pull up DraftKings right now, and we'll see. We'll take a look at the odds. Some fights to take, some fights to stay away from. All right, let's start us off here. First fight, Cameron Saymon, Steven Koslow. It's a tough fight. Simon is a huge favorite. I don't know if I like it. I do think Simon wins, but I don't think he's a lock. I don't. Same thing with the second fight. De Silva, Salvador. Don't really love anyone there. TJ Brown, Eric Silva. I like Eric Silva a lot. It's tough, though, for a UFC debuter. Billy Quarantillo, Alex Hernandez. Yet another tough fight. Like I said, Billy Quarantillo's ring rust could play a role. Also, Alex Hernandez, his weight shift could play a role. His gas tank could play a role. That fight could go either way. Chris Curtis, Joaquin Buckley, that fight could go either way. Both men are dangerous. Now, one I do like here, I think we're going to start us off here. Edmund Shabazian, I think he's a lock in my opinion. I think Dalcha's a little too wild, and I think Edmund's versatility is going to play a role. I like Rosas Jr. I'm not going to touch him, though. You never know with an 18-year-old kid in his UFC debut. Rosenstrike Daukaus is going to be tight. Could go either way. Wow, Bryce Mitchell, Ilya Taporia. This one's interesting. Taporia is the favorite. Wow, I did not know that. You know what? Just for the value, guys, I kind of like Bryce Mitchell there. I hate his fight style, but Bryce Mitchell at plus 120, I kind of love it. I love Duplessis. Ponzinibbio, Morano is going to be tough. I kind of like Patty Pimblett, and I love Ankalaev. So there's a short little 5-pick parlay for you. That's probably my five, the only five that I think are true locks, except for the Bryce Mitchell, I guess, being the underdog. I just I can't stay away from that value. I just Bryce Mitchell at plus 120 is just I think an absolute steal. You guys parlay that. You guys put $10 on that. Payout of 88.24. Not a bad profit for a 5-pick parlay, which should all be locks with the potential for Bryce Mitchell to lose that for you at plus 120. Doesn't make sense. He's the underdog, but I'm going to stop talking about that. And that, my friends, is going to do it for my UFC 282 preview. We got some fun preliminary action coming on Saturday. We have a main event that needs to prove it, or a main card that needs to prove itself. We'll see what happens. Guys, catch me on Monday. I'm going to break it all down for you guys. And as always, thank you for watching. And please do not forget to hit that like, follow, subscribe button, whatever platform you guys are on. That will help us out tremendously. Guys, have a great night. And guys, get ready for UFC 282.